What's up, guys? Matthew here. This is another episode of Weapons and Weaknesses, a pre-fight breakdown for Merab vs. O'Malley at UFC 306. I find it really interesting when we get to see two fighters match up that have similar styles. For example, Corey Sandhagen and O'Malley is a fight that I and probably many other people wanted to see, and it's a fight I still want to see. At the same time, though, these fights end up being kind of predictable. We know what each guy is going to try and do, especially in fights between two strikers. On the other hand, it can also be really interesting to see two fighters that don't have similar styles at all. A McGregor versus Khabib, a Khamzat Chimaev versus Kevin Holland. It's predictable in the sense that we still know what each guy is going to try and do, but we don't really know where the fight is going to go and whose style is going to dominate the other. O'Malley versus Merab is one of these fights. And for that reason, I would say it's one of the more interesting stylistic matchups in the bantamweight division right now. On the one hand, you've got the pinpoint, technical, crafty striker. And on the other hand, you've got the non-stop wrestling pressure that just takes people to the deep water. People are calling this a McGregor versus Khabib on Wish, which is sort of accurate. If anything, I see more similarities between Merab and Khabib than I do O'Malley and McGregor. Merab really does remind me of Khabib in a lot of ways. The way he pressures and uses his stand-up to set up takedowns, and just the way he pressures his opponents on the ground. Even his general stance and the way he moves on the feet is very reminiscent of Khabib. I would say Khabib was better at keeping his opponents on the ground, but the way Merab uses his body locks and hooks his opponent's legs on the ground to drag them down, and just the amount of weight he puts on his opponents really has that Dagestani feel to it. Basically, if you swapped out Khabib's front kick for a low calf kick, and you made the top control and submission threat a little worse, you've got Merab. It's no secret, Merab's greatest strength in this fight with O'Malley is his constant wrestling pressure. O'Malley did very well against Aljo in defending the takedowns, because Aljo's game plan in that fight was to get him to the ground and submit him. But I would say Merab's wrestling is more oppressive than Aljo's. Aljo was very dangerous if he got O'Malley down. With Merab, it's more a matter of when he takes O'Malley down. But once he's there, he's not much of a submission threat like Aljo was. But he doesn't really need to be, and the Yan fight proved that. He attempted 49 takedowns, which is an absurd number. He had a 20% success rate, so not great. But when you shoot 50 times, a 20% success rate makes 10 takedowns, which is not bad for a total number. And the crazy thing is he didn't even really do much with them. But Yan spent basically the entire fight defending takedowns, so he wasn't able to build up any kind of offense. And honestly, defending 80% of those takedowns is pretty damn good. But even if he defends the takedown, Merab might have him in a standing front headlock, or maybe he even does get him to the ground and he's forced to get back to his feet. It's like someone was holding him underwater, and just when he fights back to the surface to get some air, he gets shoved right back underwater for 25 minutes straight. Merab never drowned him, but he wasn't the one struggling for air the entire time. At the end of the day, it doesn't need to look pretty, it just needs to work. And that's what Merab needs to do against O'Malley. It's the textbook crotch sniffer game, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, the dude's on like a 10-fight win streak. If O'Malley spends the entire fight defending takedowns or getting back to his feet, he'll lose the fight because he won't have any time to develop any kind of offense. The problem with that style, though, is it requires Merab to be the one pressing forward, because if he dances around on the outside, O'Malley's just going to pick him apart. And this is where we get into Merab's greatest weakness. O'Malley is an outstanding counter striker, but there's a specific thing that Merab does that's gotten him knocked down 3 times in his last few fights. Merab steps into the pocket, initiating some sort of crash. His opponent does a level change, moving his head off the center line, and lands a left hook while Merab leaves that side unprotected. It happened again. Merab crashes in, his opponent level changes, head off the center line, and counters with a left hook while Merab had his right hand down. And it happened again. Merab crashes, his opponent slips, and counters with a left hook. Exact same sequence 3 times. And if you don't think O'Malley and Tim Welch did their homework, you're kidding yourself. It's the same thing that happened between Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira. When you throw with one hand, you have to keep the other hand up, because a really great striker will capitalize on it. O'Malley's greatest strength in this fight is his counterattacking, specifically his distance management and speed. He's very light on his feet, and he's good at using his lead hand and feints to bait people in, and then pull back when they throw. And now once they're way overextended, he can uncork that power hand. This is what he did to Aljo. He hit Cheetah with it several times as well. He's also a switch stance fighter, and I personally think it would be smart for him to go southpaw. Merab's a conventional fighter, so they'd be in an open stance, and O'Malley's really good at setting traps with his lead hand by baiting his opponent in and then countering with the power hand. I did a whole video on that where I went round by round in his fight with Cheeto, so I'm not going to pick it apart right now. You can go check that video out on my channel. The other thing that fighting in the open stance will do is it'll make Merab's outside low calf kick less effective. It's one of the things that Merab really likes to do, and if they're in an open stance, he'll have to use his lead leg, and it's just not as effective. O'Malley will certainly be throwing lots of feints, but I don't think they'll be quite as effective as they were in the Cheeto fight or the Yan fight. The feints are basically used to draw out reactions. When you're defending one thing, you create openings for other things. So when you feint and they react as if they're defending something, you can use that feint later on to target those areas that they expose. O'Malley did it really well against Cheeto, especially with setting up body shots. Again, I did a whole video on it that you can go watch. But I think the feints are especially effective against more defensive guys like Yan and Cheeto. Merab is much more offensive than those guys, and it's not to say that the feints won't work. I'm sure O'Malley uses the feints in ways that I'm not aware of, but I don't think Merab is going to be quite as concerned about defending every little thing as some of O'Malley's other opponents like Yan and Cheeto. A lot of people would probably say that O'Malley's greatest weakness is his ground game. And I think most of the reason why that is because we just haven't seen him on the ground that much in his UFC career. And I think we can attribute that to his incredible stand-up. All of the feints have a psychological effect on his opponents that can kind of make them stuck in the mud. Every little second, their mind is on whatever O'Malley is doing with his hands and his hips, so they're kind of afraid to commit to anything. But O'Malley's takedown defense is also quite good as well. Aljamain Sterling's plan was definitely to take him down and submit him, but he had a really hard time closing in on O'Malley because his footwork was very good, and he spent basically the entire first round chasing him around. And even when he did get in on a single leg up against the cage, O'Malley did a really good job of defending, getting a whizzer, and controlling the wrist with his opposite hand. And Aljo is very, very good at getting people down from this position. I mean, when you look at his fight with Corey Sandhagen, who's a very good fighter and very well-rounded, it really was impressive what O'Malley was able to do. Yan managed to get O'Malley down several times, but O'Malley did a pretty good job of getting back to his feet. It seems like a lot of guys tend to get really complacent off their back, almost as if they are giving up on winning the round and they just want to save energy. But O'Malley never really did that. He was always very active off of his back and getting back to his feet pretty much every time. Honestly, O'Malley has looked so strong throughout pretty much his entire UFC career. It's really hard to pinpoint what his biggest weakness is in this fight. He certainly faced the most adversity in the Yan fight, so that's probably the place to look. If anything, I would say the more tired he is, the less crafty he is, the more flat-footed he is, and that's why the Yan fight looked like such a war. He definitely did some great things in that fight. Obviously, he got the win. It was definitely his ugliest fight, and I think that's because Yan put on a ton of pressure. O'Malley showed in the Cheeto fight that he can go 5 rounds and be pretty effective in every round, but he was the one setting the pace in that fight because Cheeto basically didn't do anything. This will not be true for the Merab fight. Merab will be putting on the pressure like Yan did, and he will absolutely be able to keep up that 3-round pace like Yan did, but for 5 rounds. So I would say O'Malley's biggest weakness in this fight is letting the fight go on too long. If he doesn't get a finish in the first 3 rounds, I think the longer the fight goes, purely based on how much energy they have and how it affects their abilities, the more it favors Merab. So how do I think this fight will play out? As I said, the longer this fight goes, the more it favors Merab because he just has an outrageous gas tank. If it starts to get ugly and O'Malley starts to get tired, I think Merab can spam takedowns and win pretty much any round. In the early rounds, Merab is definitely at a massive disadvantage. O'Malley basically doesn't have any major holes in his game that Merab can exploit, while Merab absolutely does. He uses his stand-up to spam takedowns, and he leaves his right side open pretty much every time. I think in the early rounds, it's open season for O'Malley. If I'm Merab, don't go berserk on the early rounds and try to focus on being a little more defensively sound. As the fight goes on, Merab doesn't have to worry about that as much and he can kind of let on the throttle a little more. O'Malley's going to get a little less sharp and his chances of knocking him out will start to drop off. That being said, it's a bit of a catch-22 because putting on less pressure in the early rounds will leave O'Malley with more energy in the later rounds, in which case he'll still be really dangerous, which is what Merab doesn't want. So in the early rounds, Merab still needs to be very active and use his cardio as a weapon, but don't get reckless. Keep that right hand up and throw calf kicks and wrestle, but don't barge into the pocket guns blazing, because you're basically going to hand O'Malley a knockout. O'Malley, on the other hand, needs to use his footwork, lots of lateral movement, and just trust that left hand. Merab's footwork isn't that great. He's very linear and one-dimensional, lots of forward and backward and not very much side to side. So O'Malley doesn't really need to worry as much about where is Merab and more how far is Merab. And he's really good at judging distance. And if he's looking for it, he can absolutely counter Merab when he leaves his right side unprotected. And Merab's chin isn't that great. He can recover really quickly though. So O'Malley should be cautious about rushing in to get a finish. I think that's where Marlon Moraes kind of screwed up when he fought Merab. He had Merab on skates for like half the first round, but he chased the finish, Merab recovered, and then he gassed out and lost. If O'Malley knocks him down, Merab can sniff his crotch all he wants, but O'Malley's going to win that round because damage trumps everything. So unless Merab does something crazy, he's almost guaranteed to lose any round where he gets knocked down. So if O'Malley manages to get a couple knockdowns, he could win by decision. I think O'Malley's going to win this one probably by a round 1 or round 2 TKO. If it goes to decision, I favor Merab. I just don't really see O'Malley winning by a decision in this one. The only way I can see that happening is if he takes a really patient approach and just racks up knockdowns. Anyways, that'll do it for the breakdown. Let me know what you guys think about this fight. I'm pretty excited about it. Thanks for watching.